it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead, and I decided to start a group of stories that I'm going to tell, because I've always loved storytelling. And I just wanted to tell some of my own stories. So I'm going to start with a little bit about my jobs that I had when I was very young. So when I was really young, I did babysitting from the time I was 12 years old. Did lots of babysitting. I mowed grass. And I was really a popular babysitter because whenever the kids would go to bed, I cleaned kitchens, I would vacuum. So you also got your house clean when you got home. So I would have loved to have found a babysitter that did that. Oh, it is recording. Is it? Yeah. So that was my first job. Then my first job working for a business was waitressing. I was a good waitress. I did not really enjoy waitressing because hungry people can be cranky. And I'm sorry, but very especially women can be cranky. And so that wasn't my favorite job. Although I got really good tips because, I knew how to make people happy. So after that, I went to work for a supermarket as a checker. Now that job I really liked. So on my feet all day. I loved working with the people. Had a good memory back then, so I could memorize all the prices of the sales each week and the prices of the produce, which sometimes would even change during the week. But that wasn't a problem for me, and I did really love that job. So my waitressing job, I made, I think, $2.65 an hour. And then I went to work at the supermarket, and I made somewhere around $3.50 an hour. But I really did, I was living on my own, had my own apartment, and I wanted to make more money if I could. So I also applied for a job in a sawmill, which I did not get that job. And I applied for a job at a nickel mine. The name of it was Hannah Nickel. So there's some things that I'd like you to know. I had never, ever, up to this age 19, used a shovel in my life. I just didn't do any type of outdoor manual labor. Growing up, I did all sorts of things inside, but I didn't do anything that would have been an outside man's job. I also always wore dresses. Now, not everybody did that in the 70s, but I did. And I didn't own any pants. I owned shorts and I had some blouses, but I didn't own any pants. So while I was working at the supermarket, the job that I loved, I heard from the nickel mine. They wanted to hire me. So I was excited because their wages were over $5 an hour. So that was a really great increase. On top of that, if I worked overtime, I would get time and a half. So then you're talking like $7.50 an hour, which was amazing. Or if I worked on a holiday, there was double time and a half. Now that was just exciting, the whole thought to me. Also, there were benefits available, but being young, that didn't matter to me nearly as much as the wage. So my dad helped me get ready for this job. Like I said, I had no pants, so I could wear my dad's pants. And so I had Levi's that he gave me. I also did not have any type of work boots. And even though they were a little bit too big for me, My dad had small feet. I could wear his work boots, and that was great. And I also got his shirts. Boy, praise God for my dad. He really set me up. Also with gloves. Didn't have any of those either. So it was finally time for my first day at work. I was all dressed like a man, according to my standards, not to other people's, I know. And so I was all dressed and I headed off to work, and there were several new people. Now, I do want to say that most of the people that worked at the nickel mine were men, because it's very labor intensive, hard labor intensive work. But this was during the time of equality beginning for women, and so they were strongly encouraged to hire women, or people of any ethnic differences than just white. So they hired me. So I was there with the new people, and we were being told what we were going to do and when we were going to work and stuff by the foreman. And then they put us to work. So the first job I had was in the smelter. The smelter was a very different place for me. Each floor was really, really high. I really don't know. I'm guessing 30 feet tall, because there was big equipment that went through. And one of the things that went through that just scared me, I was like a scared rabbit, I'll tell you, was they had these huge pots. And these huge pots went on some sort of like a railroad tie, only from above. I don't know what they call that. And they were filled with liquid nickel ore. So this melted ore. And when they would go overhead, there would be a sound. And whenever you heard this sound, the foreman said you need to be looking up and make sure that you are not under that, because they didn't want any risk of some of that melted ore falling on you. And nobody wanted that risk. In fact, we had a family friend who had been in an accident at that mine a few years before I started, and he had third-degree burns over the majority of his body, and it was terrible. So I was really nervous about it, and that thing, I got to tell you, it never stopped. It was always either picking up the melted ore, or it was moving it to pour it. And so I was constantly looking and trying to be safe, and I was just watching everybody else, and they're just working. They're not looking up, but I was, just like I said, like a scared rabbit afraid of a hawk. My job was, after they poured the melted ore into these molds, because they made them in agates, they might have called it. They were long bars. That my job was, as soon as that was done, I went in with some other people, and whatever had splashed onto the ground, I had to move. I got to tell you, when I stepped on that through my dad's work boots, I could feel the heat coming up to my feet. And when I picked up that metal, which turned solid right away, but was still very hot, it was a little unnerving. And I don't even remember what we did with it, but we got it out of the way. So that was my first job when I was there. Another job that I had was shoveling ferrosilicate, and that is a very fine, like talcum powder metal, I guess it is, that can actually cause black lung. And So I went there, and there was another man working. I wasn't impressed with him at all. Um, it just seemed like he was continually taking a break, a cigarette break. And when he would shovel, he would put just a tiny little bit on the tip of his shovel and fling that over. And I thought, oh, this man is so lazy. Got to remember, I was only 19 years old. And so when I went to do it, I pushed that shovel all the way in. It slid in really good. Like I said, very similar to what I imagined talcum powder would be like. And then I went to throw it, toss it. I couldn't move that shovel. I was doing this and it would not move at all. So the ferrosilicate was very dense and horribly heavy. So now I knew why he put just a tiny little bit, and he was a man. And so I was putting a tiny little bit doing that. So that wasn't another job that I had there. But what I want to tell you was an interesting thing. One job I had was on either the third or fourth floor. I don't really remember how many floors there were. And like I said, these are 20, 30 feet tall floors. We had to go upstairs, and there was a conveyor belt, and gravel needed to be shoveled on that. Well, they had a man lift in this place, and what that was, it wasn't much wider than this. It was a conveyor belt that instead of going long horizontally, it went vertically. And it would lift you through all of these floors. And there was a little platform that you could stand on. It was just a piece of metal. And there was a metal cup on that belt that you could hold on to. I was, and I still am, terrified of heights. So I didn't want to go up that. But that was a requirement of the job, and I did want the money. So I began watching the people go up, and I, totally lost my nerve. And I told the foreman, I just can't go up that. I said, but I promise you, if you will let me run these stairs, I will get upstairs before the last person rides the man lift up. He said, if you don't do this, you're fired. So I got on the man lift, and I clamped my hand down on that. There was nothing around you at all. And I began to go up. And as it went through the floor of each story, it was cut out, bigger than the place you're standing so you could go through it. I could see that, but I could not do anything other than look straight ahead at that belt. I was terrified. Well, on the final floor, on the side, there was a light that would blink. And when it blinked, that meant that man lift was about to go over. And it was time to step off. And I couldn't see it. I was frozen on this man lift. But my foreman was on there, and he began hollering, Maria, get off. Maria, get off. Maria, get off. And finally he yanked me off. I couldn't move. I literally could not move. So he yanked me off, and I was on the solid floor. So he told me I needed to do it again. I said, I can't do it. He said, you do it again or you're fired. So I went down by stairs, I want to tell you. And when I got down there, I got on the man lift again. It did not change anything that it was the second time. So I cupped my hands on it. I could not see sideways at all, although I could see down a little bit. And that was not a great way for me to be looking. And I went through the floors, and I heard the foreman yelling, "Maria, step off. Maria, step off, step off, step off." Yank. He pulled me off again. I told him, "I can't do this, but I can run up these stairs, I promise you." And so he agreed that he would let me do that. So one day it was my turn to go up to the highest floor, whatever that was, and to shovel this gravel. And I ran. Now, I could never do that now. I don't even know how I did it then. But I ran up all those stairs, and I got up before the last people were there. And my job was to shovel. I don't even know how they got this gravel up there, but there was a pile of gravel, and I was supposed to shovel it onto a regular conveyor belt. And there was a rope. And that rope, he said, in case of emergency, you pull this rope, Maria. Well, I didn't know what that rope would do. He didn't tell me what it would do. And shoveling gravel was a very mindless task. So I'm shoveling, and I didn't take any breaks because, I didn't smoke. I didn't drink coffee. I really didn't even drink water. I just kept working. And as I'm shoveling, I began to daydream. And I was daydreaming, I wonder what happens if you pull this rope. And I'd have different thoughts in my mind about that. I wonder what happens if you pull this rope. I got to tell you, for me, there is a very small difference between daydreaming and doing something. And the next thing I know, I had reached down and I had pulled the rope. And I can tell you what happened in that situation. What happened was the conveyor belt stopped. Sirens were going off through the entire smelter. Each floor, everything came to a stop. Sorry. And I could hear people yelling from each floor, "What floor is it on?" And here I'm upstairs. And the panic that was going on. And they had thought that there had been a terrible accident. So I'm upstairs, a 19-year-old girl who had always been taught not to lie. And that has never been a weakness for me, lying. And I'm up there with all the sirens going off and all the yelling going off. And I'm thinking the only reasonable thing for me to do would be to jump out this window that's up there. But of course, I'm not going to do that. Next thing I know, my foreman came running into the room because they had isolated where it was, and it was where I was. And his face was beet red from running up all those stairs. And there I'm standing. A young girl, young woman, and there's nothing wrong with me. And he gasped out, "What happened?" And I said, "I wondered what happened if I pulled the rope." His face got even redder. I didn't know that that was possible, but it did get redder. And he simply turned around and went back down those stairs. And I stood there not knowing what was going to happen. And the sirens stopped, and my conveyor belt got moving again. And all the other things, the big pots of ore and every other thing that was in there began moving again. And I began shoveling gravel onto the conveyor belt. I didn't lose my job over that. I just think that's a miracle. And I think of the razzing that my poor foreman must have taken about that silly girl that stopped the entire smelter that day. So I just thought I would tell you that story myself. We've all done things that were absolutely foolish, and that was one of mine. I had no idea, but I learned from it, and I kept that job for a whole nother 4 or 5 days. I worked there about 8 days, and it was a sweaty, hot job, and I decided to go back to the market. But that's my experience at Hannah Nickel. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll listen in to my future stories. All right. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and share this video if you think that you know anybody else that would be interested in it. And I want to pray blessings on you and yours, in your house, out of your house, in the day and the night, and whatever you do, keep dreaming.